My name is Agent Sarah Mitchell. I'm 32 years old, and I never thought my college roommate would publicly humiliate me for wearing cheap Walmart clothes at her charity gala. But when the FBI director called me in the middle of her speech, everyone discovered why I dress like I'm broke. Let me start from the beginning, because what happened at that charity gala was the culmination of 15 years of carefully constructed lies that I had to maintain to protect my real identity. I'm Special Agent Sarah Mitchell, and for the past 8 years, I've been working deep undercover for the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. My specialty is infiltrating high society circles to investigate white-collar crime, money laundering, and charity fraud. The catch? I have to live my cover identity 24/7, which means everyone, including my oldest friends, believes I'm a struggling freelance graphic designer barely making ends meet. My cover story was perfect. Sarah Mitchell, the girl who grew up middle class but never quite made it in the big city. I rented a modest apartment, drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic, and yes, shopped at Walmart and Target for my clothes. To everyone who knew me, I was the friend who always had to decline expensive dinners, couldn't afford designer clothes, and lived paycheck to paycheck. The irony was that my FBI salary was actually quite good, plus I had a substantial trust fund from my grandmother that I couldn't touch without breaking my cover. But nobody could know that Agent Sarah Mitchell owned a house in the suburbs under an alias, or that I drove a BMW to FBI headquarters every morning before switching to my beat-up Honda for my cover life. My college roommate, Victoria Ashford, was the complete opposite of my cover identity. She came from old money, married a hedge fund manager, and lived in a world of charity galas, designer handbags, and social climbing. We'd stayed in touch after college, and my struggling artist persona made me the perfect charity case friend, someone she could feel superior to while still claiming to care about people less fortunate. For 8 years, I endured her condescending comments about my lifestyle. "Oh, Sarah, you really should let me take you shopping sometime," she'd say with fake concern. "I know some great discount stores." Or, "Don't worry about dinner, honey, I'll pick up the check. I know money's tight for you." It was all part of the job. Victoria moved in exactly the circles I needed to monitor, and her patronizing friendship gave me access to events and people that would have been impossible to reach otherwise. Through her charity connections, I'd already helped the Bureau build cases against 3 major money laundering operations. But last month, everything changed when Victoria invited me to the annual Ashford Foundation Gala, a $1,000 per plate charity event that was actually the centerpiece of my current investigation. "Sarah, darling," she said when she called, "I have a wonderful surprise. I've bought you a ticket to our gala next weekend. I know you could never afford it yourself, but I wanted you there to see how successful people make a difference in the world." The condescension was thick enough to cut with a knife, but this was exactly what I'd been working toward for 6 months. "That's so generous of you, Victoria," I replied, playing my role perfectly. "I'll have to see if I can find something appropriate to wear." "Oh, don't worry about that," she laughed. "It's not like anyone expects you to compete with the other guests. Just wear whatever you have. Everyone knows you do your best with limited resources." The gala was held at the Grand Ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton, and it was exactly the kind of ostentatious display of wealth I'd learned to navigate in my undercover work. Crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, and enough diamonds to fund a small country's budget. I arrived wearing exactly what Victoria expected, a simple black dress from Target, basic shoes, and minimal jewelry. To everyone there, I looked like exactly what I was supposed to be, Victoria's charity case friend who was out of her league. The evening started typically. Victoria introduced me to her friends as my dear friend Sarah, the struggling artist I was telling you about. The patronizing smiles and pitying looks were familiar territory. I played my part perfectly, looking slightly overwhelmed by the opulence and grateful for Victoria's kindness. But then, during the cocktail hour, I overheard a conversation that made my blood run cold. Victoria was talking to a group of her wealthy friends near the bar, and they thought they were speaking quietly enough that I couldn't hear them from across the room. "Honestly, I don't know why Victoria keeps bringing that Sarah girl to these events," said Margaret Whitmore, the wife of a prominent banker. "She's so shabby. Look at her cheap Walmart clothes." Victoria laughed, gesturing in my direction. "I keep trying to help her, but some people just don't have any class. She'll never fit in with people like us." "It's almost embarrassing," added another woman. I mean, I understand charity cases, but does she have to bring them to our social events? Victoria's laugh was particularly cruel. The funny thing is, she actually thinks she belongs here. She has no idea how pathetic she looks next to real successful women. I invited her tonight as a kind of social experiment, to show everyone what happens when people don't apply themselves in life. The group erupted in laughter at my expense, completely unaware that the pathetic woman in Walmart clothes was standing 20 feet away, wearing a wire and recording every word of their conversation. But Victoria wasn't done. The best part, she continued, warming to her audience, is that she's so grateful for my charity. She has no idea that I only keep her around to make myself feel better about how far I've come. Sometimes you need a failure in your life to remind you of your own success. That's when my phone buzzed with a text that would change everything. It was from Director Matthews at FBI headquarters. Operation Golden Thread is go. We have warrants. Initiate arrest protocol immediately. I stepped away from the crowd and called the secure line. Agent Mitchell, came the director's familiar voice. We've got confirmation on the financial records. The Ashford Foundation has been laundering money for the Kozlov organization for 3 years. We're moving tonight. Copy that, Director, I replied quietly. I'm in position at the gala. How do you want to proceed? We have teams surrounding the building. Make the announcement, then step back and let the arrest teams take over. And Mitchell? Great work on this case. I looked across the ballroom at Victoria, who was still entertaining her friends with stories of my supposed failures, completely unaware that her entire world was about to collapse. Taking a deep breath, I walked back toward the group and cleared my throat. Excuse me, I said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. I need to make an important announcement. Victoria turned toward me with an annoyed expression. Sarah, what are you doing? This isn't the time for whatever little speech you've prepared. Actually, Victoria, this is exactly the time, I replied, pulling out my FBI badge and holding it up for everyone to see. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Special Agent Sarah Mitchell with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Conversation stopped, champagne glasses paused halfway to lips, and every eye in the ballroom turned toward the struggling artist who had just identified herself as a federal agent. Victoria's face went through a series of expressions, confusion, disbelief, and then dawning horror as she realized what was happening. Financial Crimes Division, I continued, my voice carrying across the now silent ballroom. For the past 8 years, I've been working undercover to investigate money laundering operations connected to several charitable organizations. At that moment, my phone rang. I answered it on speakerphone, loud enough for everyone around me to hear. Agent Mitchell, came Director Matthews' voice, clear and authoritative. This is Director Matthews. What's your status? I'm in position, Director, I replied professionally. The subjects are present and unaware. Ready for your orders. Execute the operation, Agent Mitchell. You have full authority. I hung up and looked directly at Victoria, whose face had gone completely white. Victoria Ashford, I said clearly, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit money laundering, wire fraud, and racketeering. You have the right to remain silent. The ballroom erupted in chaos. Guests started pulling out phones to record the dramatic arrest, while others tried to leave only to discover that FBI agents had quietly surrounded all the exits. As I read Victoria her rights, she stared at me in complete shock. But you're poor, she stammered. You shop at Walmart. You drive that terrible car. You can't afford. It's called deep cover, Victoria, I explained calmly as FBI agents moved through the crowd, making additional arrests. Everything you thought you knew about me was a carefully constructed lie designed to get close to your operation. Margaret Whitmore, who had been laughing about my cheap clothes just minutes earlier, was also being handcuffed by federal agents. The Walmart clothes, the old car, the modest apartment, all part of my cover identity, I continued. For 8 years, I've been documenting your charity's financial crimes while you patronize me for being unsuccessful. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. The woman they'd been mocking as a failure was actually the federal agent who had been investigating them for years. As Victoria was led away in handcuffs, she turned back to me with desperate eyes. Sarah, please, this is all a misunderstanding. We've been friends for 15 years. You can't do this to me. We haven't been friends, Victoria, I replied sadly. You kept me around as a charity case to make yourself feel superior. You just spent 20 minutes telling your friends how pathetic and unsuccessful I am. Friends don't humiliate each other for entertainment. The local news crews had somehow gotten wind of the arrests and were setting up outside. The story of the undercover FBI agent who infiltrated high society while being mocked for her cheap clothes would be front-page news by morning. Over the next several hours, as the FBI processed the arrests and seized financial records, the full scope of the operation became clear. The Ashford Foundation had been washing money for Russian organized crime, using charity donations to legitimize millions in illegal funds. Victoria, who had inherited control of the foundation from her father, had been the key facilitator. The struggling artist she'd patronized for 8 years had built the case that would send her to federal prison for 15 years. A week later, after the story had made national headlines, I received a call from my actual supervisor, not Director Matthews, but Assistant Director Chin, who ran the Undercover Operations Division. Outstanding work on Operation Golden Thread, Mitchell, she said. The financial records you gathered will help us roll up the entire Kozlov money laundering network. Thank you, ma'am, I replied. It was a long assignment, but worth it. I imagine it wasn't easy maintaining that cover for 8 years, especially dealing with subjects who treated you so poorly. I thought about all the condescending comments, the pitying looks, and Victoria's final cruel speech about keeping me around as a failure to make herself feel successful. Actually, I said, it made the job easier. When targets underestimate you, they let their guard down. Victoria was so convinced of my inferiority that she never suspected I might be anything other than what I appeared to be. Well, you're off deep cover now. Ready to go back to being yourself? For the first time in 8 years, I could drive my BMW to work, wear my nice clothes, and live in my actual house. I could stop pretending to struggle financially and start being Special Agent Sarah Mitchell instead of struggling artist Sarah. But the best part was reading the news coverage of the case. Every article mentioned how the suspects had been caught by an undercover agent they'd repeatedly mocked for her appearance and financial status. Victoria's cruel comments about my cheap Walmart clothes were quoted in newspapers across the country. The woman who had laughed at my Target dress was now wearing an orange jumpsuit in federal custody. 6 months later, at Victoria's sentencing hearing, I sat in the gallery wearing my FBI dress uniform, the same uniform I'd worn when testifying as the lead investigator in her case. She looked over at me once, and I could see the recognition in her eyes of just how completely she had underestimated the woman she'd kept around as a charity case. The judge sentenced her to 18 years in federal prison, noting that her complete lack of remorse and pattern of exploiting charitable giving for criminal purposes warranted the harsh sentence. As I left the courthouse that day, I thought about Victoria's words at the gala. Sometimes you need a failure in your life to remind you of your own success. She was right about needing perspective. But she got it backwards. Sometimes you need to remember that success isn't always what it appears to be, and the person you're mocking for their cheap clothes might be the federal agent who's about to destroy your life. The FBI doesn't pay us to look wealthy. They pay us to catch criminals. And sometimes, looking like a failure is exactly what the job requires. Victoria learned that lesson the hard way, from a federal prison cell, while wearing clothes that definitely weren't from Walmart, but weren't exactly designer either.